Hi everyone, it's your book coach Liisa Kovala here. Grab a cup of coffee and settle in for a discussion about all things writerly. I'm the author of Sister's Winter War and Surviving Stutthof, my father's memories behind the death cave, and I'm an author accelerator, certified fiction, and memoir book coach. As a Finnish Canadian, I also love my coffee. In this podcast, we'll take a coffee break together to chat with authors, publishers, book coaches, marketers, agents, publicists, booksellers, and many others. Welcome to Women Writing. So happy you could join us for a coffee and a chat. Today, I have the great pleasure of having my coffee break with Alex Van Tol. Alex is the best-selling author of 15 books and an author accelerator certified book coach. She works with writers across genres and at all levels of craft, with particular skill in dialogue and character development. She is also a somatic coach, helping people release stuck patterns and regulate their nervous systems. Hi, Alex. How are you?
I'm fantastic, and I'm so excited to be sitting with you today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see you. So, folks may not know this, but we're both part of Book Coaches Canada. And that's how we met, with a group of lovely coaches who get together bi-weekly to talk about all things book coaching. So that's how I've gotten to know you. But I love this conversation already because before, just kind of in prepping for this, I learned so many things about you that I didn't know anything about. So I'm so excited about our conversation. So the first thing that I didn't know, I don't know why I didn't know this, because if we were talking about book coaching things, but you're actually a really prolific writer, and you have published, I'm going to say 15
Mhm.
books. Can you
Yeah.
tell us about how that happened? Like, what were you doing? Did you just start writing right away, or were you doing other things first? How did you come to writing?
Well, I knew way back that I wanted to be a writer. I trained as a teacher and started out teaching, and I was sort of writing on the side, just writing my own stuff, imagining that I could get a picture book published because
Right.
I thought they were easy. So that's where I started. I was pitching picture books, and never placed a picture book because I didn't understand how hard it was. But yeah, I wrote my first book in the one that first one that got published was in 2009. And the relationship I had with the publisher was so great, so easy, so so wonderful. And they needed these books for reluctant readers. And so, once I wrote a book that looked like it was going to satisfy their requirements, that they opened the door and they were like, okay, we would love you to write more.
Wow.
So that's how I ended up, getting published. That was with Orca Book Publishers. And then from there, um, just through my connections with my professional writing community, the Royal BC Museum approached me and asked me to write a book based on one of their exhibits. That felt really good because I was like, oh,
Amazing.
yeah, like, wow, that's a nationally known museum. So I did that. And then I did some short biographies for Crabtree Publishing in the States. And my last books were with Rocky Mountain Books. And again, that's from, knowing people in the writing community. That was actually where I got my first coaching assignment too. The
Okay.
publisher, Rocky Mountain, asked me to help one of their writers who had run into trouble and just like was in the mix of not knowing how to pull a book together. So so in a sense, that publishing arc kind of led me into coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said 15 books, 15 published, 16 published, but one publisher went out of business. I
Okay.
made $1 on
Okay.
I paid $1 on that book and then they
Right?
went under.
Oh
But
no.
I know.
You
And
just never know what's going to happen, right? Like, it's just crazy. So, were you a public school teacher then, but earlier? Is that what you had trained for? And then did you teach in a public school?
I was in the independent system in
Okay.
Calgary,
Yes.
and I
Yeah.
taught for 6 years in Calgary.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to Victoria, I worked in the independent system. But I did my
Right.
practicums in the
Yeah.
Catholic system and in the public
Right.
school system.
Absolutely. Well, I was just thinking because I taught elementary school for 8 years, and then I taught high school after that. And a lot of my students were reluctant readers. Like, so I'm thinking of YA and middle grade books, like that is so important that there are books out there that will engage a young reader who's, maybe doesn't really want to read. But then the stories are so engaging, and they want to read more. They're accessible. They're generally a little bit shorter, but the storylines have to be like fast paced and get them really involved. So like there's such a skill in writing for reluctant readers. Like you
It,
can't just
yeah.
kind of meander around.
Yes. And it's all of what you say is true. You know, you have to have a story when you're writing for middle grade or high school, like YA. Those are sophisticated people,
Yeah.
right? They are not, you cannot write with, you can use super accessible vocabulary, but you're not going to use a super accessible, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like basic elementary
Right.
line. They want sophisticated stories with
Yes,
emotion, drama, high stakes.
for
So
sure.
there's a little bit of calibration. You've got to tell a rich story,
Yeah.
but you keep your number of you keep your protagonist, they've only got one, and you've only got a couple secondary
Yeah.
characters. Because as soon as you start layering in too many characters,
Yeah.
that becomes discouraging. So
Mhm.
there's a bit of a
Yeah.
formula, a bit of an art to it that took a
Really.
bit of getting used to. The hardest part was actually keeping my vocabulary
Yeah.
accessible at a grade 4 reading level or lower. And now there's a lot of great books in the space that are geared towards like even K-1 reading
Yeah.
levels.
Yeah. It's like it's such as a teacher, it was so important. I remember I taught a lot of grade 9 applied and 10 applied in Ontario. That's sort of students who have some learning difficulties and a lot off not always but often reluctant readers, and they would just, and I had a lot of orca books, and now I'm wondering, did I have Alex Van Tol on my bookshelf and I just didn't know it? I probably
You
did.
probably
I
did.
probably did. And my students, once they kind of got understood that that group of books was not only well, they liked them at first because, oh, look, it's short. That was the first go to. And then, oh, actually, and I can relate to this character. And they're not in grade 4, they're in grade 9 or 10 or grade 11, even. Like they could see themselves in the characters. And it was so important. And then you just see them read one after the other, after the other, after the other, because it's, you have to be able to access the story and see yourself in them too. So
Yeah.
I just think it's like amazing that you wrote all of those books and have made such a, I think, a really big impact on readers. And maybe you don't, as writers, we don't always know that, but as a teacher, I know that to be true. People have read your books and have, maybe not necessarily become lifelong readers. Like we all would all love that, but making those books so much more accessible. And
Yeah.
to me, it's speaking to understanding your reader, right? Understanding who we're writing for. Like we're not just writing for ourselves, we're writing for other people.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest things that you will understand this as a book coach, and I have to do in this line of work is really help the writer change their orientation from thinking about like almost being self-conscious about the writing to really thinking about who's the end user, who's the person who's going to be picking up this book, and how do I bring them into the book so that they can have the experience that my protagonist is having. And that's a really big brain shift, isn't it?
It's 100%. I think as new writers, folks, like your dream might be to write a book, right? So it's a personal thing and it feels like, okay, I've got a story and I have an idea and it's all focused in. But what we both know is it has to focus out. And that, like you say, is a huge shift.
Yeah.
At what point, like when you started writing, were you kind of aware of that right from the beginning, or was that something that you transformed to it? Or was at the first book, was it like, oh, I just really want to do this and this is something important to me?
I would say in the early years, in the first few books, I really wasn't, I hadn't been, I hadn't trained myself to really think about that audience. Um, what I think helped me was that I'd grown up reading Stephen King, and he's very forward moving and exciting and, generally accessible. So that really bolstered me. But what actually really trained me in focusing on my reader was writing for magazines and writing various types of nonfiction for different companies.
Right.
And often that's in the marketing space. And
Yes.
in marketing, it's all about getting the right message to the exact person you want to get the message to. So I think that, all the years of practice when I was a professional writer have really helped me understand that, oh, it's not about me. It's not even about this company that's hired me to do this. It's
Yeah.
about the person that they want
Yeah.
to access.
Yeah. That's incredible training right there. I mean, not just the writing part, but and the messaging part, but the reaching the audience. Like that is so powerful. And as a book coach, having those skills, not only as an author yourself, but also and having done that process, because you know how grueling it can be to write a book, but being able to reach that audience and know who they are and what you're trying to say to them. Like it's so
And that
integral.
And that ideal reader, when we do a blueprint with our clients, one of the steps in our blueprint is in the author accelerator blueprint that we use is who's your ideal reader? And I've had writers kind of become frustrated with that question because they're like, well, I don't want to just have one person.
Right.
Obviously, I want my book to talk to thousands.
Right.
Yes. And the more specifically you can address and satisfy just one perfect person who should receive your message, the more powerful and well, integral that message is. And so the more chance it has of actually pleasing and satisfying thousands of
Yeah.
people adjacent. And when you really get that ideal reader nailed down, that's one of the best things a writer can do to set themselves up for easy marketing for their
Yeah.
book. And that's something that I'm glad we're having this conversation about it because a lot of writers don't know that. And why should they, right?
Mm,
Because it's not
true.
their métier.
Yeah.
But this is the more precisely you can define that person who's really going to experience joy or transformation from the story
Mhm.
you're telling, the more easily you are going to understand as a writer, okay, well, where do those people hang out? What channels are they on? Where can I reach them?
Yeah. That that's a great point. And I think that's when I'm working with especially new writers, I notice that they're so and rightly so. You're so focused on just writing the book, right? It's such a challenging thing. It's difficult. It's an emotional roller coaster. But we're kind of the ones saying, but also like if you can envision the end product, like where is this going to go and how is it going to get out there? And it's like a little bit of a reminder to them that this is a step in the process and you need to go through it and you need to do all the writing and the revising and all the steps. But at some point you're going to have wanted to do this work about, who's the audience and who am I marketing to and who's going to read this. Otherwise, it's going to be a book, which many of us have, that sits in a drawer, in the bottom of a filing box or something, and it doesn't get out there.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of part of our role too, is to let them hone in on what they need to do now, yes, but also see the big picture and
Yeah.
that we need to think about those things.
Yeah. And I love how Jenny Nash puts it. She's essentially our teacher who
Yeah.
has trained us through, author accelerators programs. And she often says, how is your book going to live out there in the world?
Yeah.
That's a good, that's a piece of work that we bring in as book coaches because again, like you said, we come back to the high level and we look at the whole picture, the whole runway of the book, and
Yeah.
then we can zoom in. Whereas the writer tends to be in the weeds, right?
Yes, that's
They're
right.
really in there. And so we are out there saying, okay, so this is great. We'll work on this. And how does this impact the book's trajectory into the actual world? And how do you see yourself talking about your book?
Yeah.
Where is your book going to sit on the shelf?
Yeah.
How, what conversations is your book going to have with its neighboring books, and what conversations are you going to have with the people who read your book? So it's thinking
Absolutely.
about a great deal of variables at a book coach is thinking about a great number of variables at the same time and holding them in their mind to guide the writer because
Yeah.
they don't have the bandwidth for that.
That's right. It's true. And I think that's true of new writers, but I also think that's true of writers with a lot of experience and who have written several books because every book is a new, like it's a new project. It's new. new challenges. And so, like you said, I like that idea of, being in the weeds because you're really just struggling through there, but to have somebody there to guide you and see above the weeds and be able to be like, okay, we're going over there now.
Yes. Yeah.
You're moving in the right direction. I can see the distance, right? I
Right.
love a good visual. Yeah, that's just like, it's just an incredible relationship that can develop between a book coach and a client. Um, I do want to pivot just slightly because I've been anxious to ask you this question. And I know that you're a somatic coach. So that's a different kind of coach than book coaching. Can you tell me what that is about? Because I really feel like I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. I love that you asked me that question. Yeah, so somatic coaching is basically what it sounds like. So soma being the body, and the work there is just it kind of comes at therapy from a different place than the traditional psychological, psychology tradition, which tends to be very heady. Even cognitive behavioral therapy
Mhm.
is it's talk based, it's reflection based. Sometimes you're doing writing, but it's all cognate, right? It's
Mhm.
all happening in your head. And, there have been people for years and years and years who have stayed at the level of the body, to address trauma or to address nervous system imbalances and have, retained faith in that process. Whereas, it's almost like been two camps. There's
Mm.
people who've been working at the body basis, and then there's people who've been working in the head space,
Right.
literally. And I have just found, from reading the works of Gay Hendricks, especially, um, it's unarguable that things start in our bodies. Like our nervous system processing is just so fast.
Yeah.
And um, like our brains are very fast as well, but the actual nervous system that picks up signals from our environment, that's the immediate response that we receive. We receive input and immediately our nervous system goes into some sort of reaction. And
Yes,
then our brains make a story about it. And that's really what we do. We're meaning making machines.
we really are.
So if you want to change behavior, or if you want to drop negative patterns, or if you want to understand, why you maybe have various physical ailments,
Mhm.
dropping into the level of the body and allowing the body just to, teaching your nervous system to loosen up, being more perceptive to the feelings you have in your body. That is the beginning of unlocking a lot of the things that tend to keep us trapped in these
Yeah,
patterns that we spin around in, and then we try to address on the cognitive level.
right.
And you just can't, you actually have to get a little bit lower. It's almost like tricking yourself
Yeah.
and really letting your body speak.
Amazing. It's so fascinating to me. And I imagine that writers who understand this and who understand how if they can access that deeper level, can use that to help themselves with working through their own writing, with working through the challenges of, the blocks that we sometimes have or the insecurities we have or whatever issue is keeping us. Because I think writing is okay. I do feel like we can all learn to write. And I do feel like, it sounds simple. Sit down and write the book. Like it's like to somebody who doesn't write, but actually there's a lot of resistance in
Yep.
it, right? And so I imagine that understanding sort of that somatic system would be beneficial to writers. Do you find that to be the case, or is it sort of two separate things that you're addressing?
I haven't really meaningfully woven the two together in my
Yeah.
practice yet. Um, And that's probably just for lack of actually sitting down and thinking about, okay, how could I make these two things work together? But it's kind of funny because, there's the somatic processing on one side and then there's book coaching on the other. One is super cognitive, right? Books are
Yeah.
really, really cognitive exercises.
Mhm.
And the other one is completely body based.
Yeah.
What I have done before is, you said the word resistance a few minutes ago, and that's exactly the whole, that's the central word,
Mhm.
that underpins everything. in the somatic coaching space.
Okay.
We are in resistance
Yeah.
for, for various reasons. We're usually running along in a low grade state of fear. And
Mhm.
there's lots of ways to allow your body to process that, and it's not like I'm afraid of writing today, but it's, oh God, it feels like such a big task today,
Right.
or I don't know where I'm going, or I've got myself into a scene that I can't get out of, whatever. That's resistance.
Yeah.
And so, I've worked with one of my writers before to just actually get him to physically soften up before he sits down at his desk.
Right.
And so it's just so easy to do, and all of us can do it. Any movement that crosses your body. So if you can just tap your shoulders, anything that crosses your body kind of confuses your brain. You have to do it for, a
Okay.
couple of minutes.
Yeah.
But it really changes the loop that's been running in your brain, right? We kind of get into these loops of persistent thinking. And when we use motoric action,
Right.
it takes, 60 to 90 to 120 seconds to actually get enough brain neurons firing in a different loop, like over in your parietal lobe, right? Or over here in a different part of your brain. And so you can interrupt that loop where you're like convinced that you're stuck, or you're convinced that something's going wrong, or you just don't want to do the damn work. When
Yeah.
you give your body a chance to actually just unlock that loop, it's very effective.
That is like that's a super hot tip right there because I do like we've been told that sitting for too long isn't good and we should get up every different I've heard different things once an hour, once every 20 minutes, all different things. But then if you could add in some of that movement that's crossing your body and breathing and all those things, I think that can just help you to sit down back to it and fresh. I don't know if you're familiar with Sarah Selecki, Story as a State of Mind. It came out
Yeah.
this year, and so I've done a workshop on story of state of mind, and so much of it is about that brain and body connection and that you know breathing into it and seeing the world slightly differently, but through all your senses in a way that sometimes we sit down to the laptop and we just get we're up here and our fingers are moving and that's it. So
Yes.
I love this whole idea if you can kind of integrate some kind of movement and being able to um activate things. And I don't know that like maybe I wouldn't 100% know why it's working, but I do know that when I move and when I'm frustrated, if I go for a walk or I do something else, that it helps me like clarify my ideas, even though I'm not actually thinking about those ideas. I might be just trying to move, just trying to stretch, just trying to feel better in my body, and then my
Yep.
brain's just clearer, like it's just
Yes.
is.
It shakes things loose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
incredible.
another thing people can do is a large body movement, like the swaying spine,
Yeah.
especially in your real life when you are faced with something that creates uncertainty or fear.
Yeah.
If you have an opportunity to sway, that spinal movement is really powerful because that's kind of the center of your nervous system, right? It's back there in our spine.
Yeah.
And doing this is a signal to our body that we're not in threat,
Oh, I
right?
love that.
When we're stock still, we are signaling to our body that there's something to be afraid of. So we can
Yes.
kind of skip what is it, short circuit our body's fear response by doing something that is like the cognitive
So
dissonance,
natural.
being afraid and
Yeah.
swaying at the same time is like it's just
You can't be fearful if you're swaying. And it reminded me as soon as you said that um of holding a baby. Like what do we naturally do when we're holding a baby? We sway
that's right.
immediately.
Yeah.
It's soothing, it's protective for ourselves, for them. It feels like just a really lovely grounding thing to do. And I have noticed myself as a mother of a 22 and a 25-year-old, yeah, at moments, seeing a mother with her baby and she's swaying and I start swaying. It just
Yeah.
feels good. And so I don't know what it is, but maybe like it actually unconsciously I understand that idea of like you were saying of fear and of feeling this is a safe place and protectiveness and just your body just relaxes. Like so fascinating. I mean, we could go
And
on.
Yeah, I always can identify a mother in like the store, and
Yes.
because she's swaying, whether she's got a
Yes.
baby or not. And
That's
sometimes
right.
I'll sway, like just for no reason. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, it's the mother.
It's true, but I think there's probably something really innate in that movement that is just goes back to the beginning of time, right? It's and the
Something
center
to
of our nervous system, and it makes so much sense, and that's why it feels good, right? We need to move.
one of
And
the things.
always good things for writers, all of these things. So I know that you haven't really connected those two things concretely yet, but I think perhaps, well, I think you already know, but I think that that is like an amazing, like write a book about that, Alex.
Well,
Tell us all about
I love
it.
it. I love it. I might. I
Like
did
you're
write.
very busy already, but
I just put out a piece on Jane Friedman's blog. This podcast is evergreen, so if people want to find it, they would just look for immersive interiority. That's the title. And there's a somatic piece that I put there in the bottom of that article, and it really helps a writer to sort of drop into their character's body and therefore be able to render a scene more effectively on the page. And that can be practiced, it can be learned, absolutely. And all it comes down to is being more in touch with your own body. So
yeah,
the more writers can practice just little ways, like when you're washing dishes, in those moments where we get, there's those moments throughout the day where we drop into presence and we're actually like, oh, I'm here right now.
yes,
Practice those. And when you're in those moments of presence, take a second to just do a body scan. Notice, is there discomfort anywhere? Are you holding your breath? Just notice things in your body. And the more conversant you become with doing that in your day-to-day life, the easier it is when you're sitting at your keyboard
yeah,
to be able to imagine what it's like to be your character and
yeah,
really getting into your character's body. I think of it like almost like how a ghost will kind of slip into someone's body and inhabit it. That's kind of how I've approached it. So you slip into your character's body, and if you are practiced at noticing your own signals in real life, you're
mm,
going to be much better at picking up on what your character would actually be feeling in that
amazing.
scene. But you really have to get in there on a body level to
Yeah,
be able to fully feel um, the circumstances, the drama in whatever conversation you're having. It's very advantageous to be able to tune in on a physical level to your character and what's going on so that you just write much more powerfully that way.
yeah.
And there are definite. I love this conversation. I'm so glad you're sparking me to think about this because I'm like, I do need to bring this into my coaching practice a lot
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so beneficial. And I think I'm fascinated by it because I've always known that, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way, but when I make a very good decision, my body knows it, and I know that I've made the right decision. And when I've made a not so good decision, my body tells me, and like it signals to me before I actually process the information. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think there's so many instances where our body, if we're paying attention, gives us the signals about, whether there's something to fear or whether there's something, it just knows before we actually think about it, whether we like cognitively. So this makes so much sense to me that as writers, if we're attuned to all of those signals, we can relate to our characters in a much more deep way and be able to capture those emotions and capture that moment in our body, like without being cliched, without being,
Right. Yeah.
which we we see and it happens, right? And we try not to do that and we try to rewrite to make it better. But I think it's if you can authentically feel like you're in that body, then you can describe that sensation and the emotion on the page.
Yeah. And it's a little task for people, like in your day to day.
Yeah.
The next time you have an experience where you're suffused with joy, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe it's a child's birthday, or maybe it's your best friend graduating from cancer care, whatever it is. Take that, take that moment to be like, oh, I'm super happy. Hang on, I got to do some writer's research.
Yes.
What actually happens in my body when I'm super happy? And tune in and notice, how does the energy move, right? The energy moves upwards usually, and we get an expansion. So there's all kinds of ways that tuning into our bodies will
Oh, I love
help us
that.
become more, and get a bigger vocabulary for expressing
Yes.
things in our writing.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces of advice we all get as writers, and this is not to disclaim this, I absolutely believe it to be true, is being super aware of your surroundings, of the minute details of how the light is hitting the blade of grass, whatever it is, like the smells. And so using all of our senses, but I just don't think we've been talking about the sensation inside the body. Like I just haven't heard that. And I think that's like, I'm just having a little aha moment here right now, right? That, we do just try to describe that in our writing, but we maybe aren't paying as much attention to ourselves as we
Yeah.
should be. And like, I think that will unlock a ton of things for folks
Yeah.
as writers.
And it's also very good for, it's really good for our own health. The more we explore and allow our bodies to express what's happening, like you were talking about when you make decisions, our bodies do talk. There's a great book that, a classic book, The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel
Oh,
van.
okay. I've heard of that. I have not read it, so I must.
Yeah. The Body Keeps the Score. And the one that I go back to again and again is written by Gay and Katie Hendricks, and it's called At the Speed of Life. That one's really interesting because it's full of case studies
Okay.
of people who have pretty much hit the end of what talk therapy can do for them. At their wits' end, they come and they seek a somatic practitioner. And, there are people who have come through all kinds of bodily ailments, frozen shoulder, migraines, headaches, um, like bizarre musculature development on one side of the jaw because of clenching, because of anger. Like people, we don't even know what we're holding
Yeah.
inside. Our culture is just not, we're not really conversant in the whole nervous system thing, right? We're
Yeah.
just starting, that conversation is just opening up out there. I can see a lot happening. So those are a couple of good books that people could explore.
Amazing. So eye-opening to me. I'm so glad I asked about somatic coaching because I thought, well, that's a little off topic, but not really. I think it's like bang on in terms of us as writers and having to understand ourselves and our characters and all of those things. One thing I think is really fascinating, something that you said was um, in the specific lies the universal, and the idea that um, what I mean, like Lisa Kron says, we're wired for story, right? That's just part of innately who we are. And I know you're really passionate about that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Yeah, we are super wired for story. And that actually connects with that point I was saying about how, we make stories up about everything. Something will happen in our world, and our brain, um, through time, it's kept us safe because we make meaning from those things, right? And we learn, right? Oh, I better not do this because this might happen. So we make stories all the time. And I don't know about you, but I have never in my life met somebody who doesn't have something that's interesting inside them.
For
And
sure.
usually it's, even somebody who considers themselves boring, right? Or doesn't say anything at a party. I don't buy that. There is not
Right.
a soul on earth who hasn't walked a terrible path in some ways, right? Or
It's true.
dramatic path, or lost something, or um, been deathly afraid of being exposed for something. Like we all have, some people will call them demons. For me, it's just depths, right? Every single person has, I probably have 18 different things that I've experienced in my lifetime that even though they're very particular to me, the sequence of events would be just very much Alex Van Tol's sequence of
Yeah.
events. what what the meaning I made from them, people can find commonalities there, or basic emotional patterns. People,
Yeah.
we recognize in each other all the time the things that are alive in us. That's really what makes reality TV fascinating.
Yeah. That's
you
true.
know I think that's why and that's what makes even certain TikToks and certain memes,
Yeah.
the amount of um, universal knowledge, like people can look at a one panel meme with a great caption and be like,
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that.
It
That's a
just
book.
connects immediately. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
we, it's just a question of, to make something like that come alive on the page. Again, it's a question of being able to dig deep enough to make that story realistic enough and feel real enough to the reader that the reader then is having that story happen to them and can feel those things that are true for almost all humans, right? In the specific lies the universal. I think Henry James gets
Yeah.
credited for that, but it's hard to know nowadays when you
Yeah,
search
right.
it online.
I know if you Google it, can be attributed to anyone,
Yeah,
but these
totally.
things are repeated and repeated because they're true. Like they resonate with us, right? I think that's just an incredible way of thinking of it. And it does bring us back to understanding our body. Is like when at least I think when we're reading, we're sort of living vicariously through that character. We're experiencing the emotions that they're experiencing. I think there's been brain studies that say that our brain acts as though we are actually in that motion and in that
Yeah,
situation. Like that's just that brain and body thing again. Like we are we just are they react and experience things in a way that we consciously maybe don't understand in that moment.
yeah,
But that book has so much power to be able to transform how we are sitting and feeling and thinking and reacting and how our nervous system is reacting. Like it's just
yeah.
it's incredibly powerful to be a writer.
Yes,
If people,
absolutely. Yeah,
it's
we really get to create a dream. Dreams feel so real because they're happening in our brain. And writing, a really great novel does the same thing. And movies get pretty close. Like
yeah,
film is very, very close. And that's why it's such a persistent art form. But
right.
there's nothing as persistent as books.
Yeah,
Absolutely nothing. There's
yeah,
no podcast is going to outlast a really great book.
it's
No
true.
article, no blog
Yeah,
post. So this is one of the advantages of writing a book. Is that it's sort of a permanent record, um, and it has a long tail. Like a book will last as a message. As a trajectory for a message, it will last a lot longer than any other art form. And visual art it can really stir emotions.
mhm,
And sometimes you'll find visual art that tells a full story, but
right.
a book actually throws you right into the story and keeps you there. And you have these mirror neurons that pick up
Yeah,
the exact same emotional frequency, right? And then you're building this whole story inside your head and inside your body, and you just get wrapped up in it. It's very, very, very powerful to write a book, to write a really great book.
yeah, I agree. And I don't know if you find this with your clients, and I know that I've been guilty of this too. let's let's be honest. But there is sometimes a desire to, I have this idea, I want to write it, I'm going to rush through it, I'm going to get it out there, I want people to read it. And as coaches, we're like, okay, take a beat, like breathe.
Yeah,
um, because it, like you say, once it's out there forever.
yeah,
And I think what we all want deep down is that it is going to resonate with people and that it does have long legs and that it is powerful. But there's that part of us that wants like immediate gratification, and then there's the part that wants like longevity and legacy and all the other things. So do you find that difficult with clients to um, kind of try to get them to pause a little bit and slow down and let's see where this needs to go, how deep we can go with this before we send it off into the world?
yeah. It depends on the client. I mean, the people that I work with tend to understand that that's what the show is, right? Like you come in and you're here because you are ready to really spend the requisite amount of time
Yeah,
building a proper narrative. And I think generally for working with a book coach, that is the differentiator, right? Versus writing your draft and then sending it to an editor.
right.
Working with us, we are part of engineering the chess match that a good book is, and we see how much groundwork needs to be done, right? And Jenny Nash often likens writing a book to building a house, and I actually think that's probably the most perfect analogy. I've actually started saying it's more like building an airport, because you have runways
Yeah.
where you've got there's a lot of if-then propositions with an
Yes.
airport, right? It's like air
Right.
traffic control. If you've got one character doing this, what are the ramifications for
Right.
that in relation to this character? What does it mean for where they came from historically, like their family of origin? Like there's all these threads
Yeah.
that um, that go into creating a really this is for fiction largely that
Yeah.
I'm speaking about,
Yeah.
that go into creating a really resonant narrative. And that's because our lives as humans have, you know, myriad threads. Like, our lives are like a spider web of connection, right? And so if one thing happens here, what's the meaning we make of it? And then what does that mean for this thing over here? So, and that takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time, and it's worth spending the time to render those kinds of complexities well on the page, because that makes a more satisfying book, a more satisfying end product for your reader. And then, of course, those are the books that we hand to each other, or we buy for each
Yeah.
other, or that we decide we want to work on in our book clubs and discuss. So,
That's right.
but there is definitely this natural impatience to get it out into the market. But really, writing a book, like your first draft, is about a year-long thing.
Yeah.
And then you can spend untold numbers of years if you want, really
Yes.
tweaking.
For sure.
The benefit, I'll put our flag up here
Yeah.
and hustle for us for a
That's
sec.
right.
The benefit of working with a book coach with our process is that our writers' writing gets better and better with every deadline,
Mhm.
because we're giving feedback every couple of weeks. So our writers, and I see this in my writers, and it's thrilling, and I know you see this in your writers, and it's such a stoke because
Yeah.
it's such a different process. We'll give feedback, our writer will go off, write new pages, correct their existing pages, but the feedback that we give, they're implementing it into their next iteration. So their next piece of work that comes back is addressing too much narrative distance, or it's addressing dialogue that wasn't quite written. So now they're at a different level, and then off they go for another deadline. And so it's this amazing spiral of skill building,
Mhm.
right? So that by the time we get to the end, or the end-ish of a draft, that's a whole different writer
It
than
really
the
is.
person who started.
And
And then
that's
you
one of my
go,
favorite.
wow,
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things when the writer gets to the end of that first draft and then they go back to the beginning and see their pages that they originally submitted. And they're like, oh, it's like a light bulb goes off because they see in themselves how far they've come and what needs to happen in those pages now. But
yeah,
that doesn't happen overnight, right? It is a really long process, and it's skill building, and it's feedback, and it's discussion. It's like, but it's like you say, it's such an incredible feeling to watch that process happening, and we know it's possible, and we know it can happen. But that like I feel like I do developmental edits. I don't know if you do them as well. But I don't really love doing them because it's taking that manuscript, giving feedback, and then returning a lot of comments and an editorial letter to them, and then like off you go, good
yeah,
luck. And I just
okay.
feel like I've just like given them important feedback, but kind of but it's not the coaching part that is so satisfying, which is helping them achieve that next level.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you pass back your dev edits and you
Yeah.
kind of really want to do it again, right? Like, come see
Yeah.
me, please come
Yeah,
see me
go
in
work
two
on
more
it and
months.
then we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I have been on the recipient of developmental edits, and yes, they're great, helpful, and you can go work through it on your own. But it's also there's it's I don't think as satisfying for the writer either, because they're not like, you're kind of just working through the comments, and you're working through trying to figure out how to implement those things. But when you're working with the book coach one on one, you're really getting much more immediate, timely discussion, and you can really hash things out, and it's just such a satisfying,
It
like,
saves
amazing
a
thing.
lot of time. Yeah. And writing, one of my clients actually gave me this analogy. He said, writing is actually a trade. And he saw that because he came up through the trades.
Right.
And he was a roofer and now he runs a construction company. And he said, writing is actually a trade. It like somebody like me, I've been doing it for 30 years. And so there's a level of mastery that most people who want to write a book, they're not coming at it from a
Right.
place of being a professional writer.
Right.
So why should they have all those skills?
Right.
And yeah, there's this persistent thought out there that I can write a book by myself. And he said that's like somebody actually building a house by themselves.
Yeah.
And and
With
it
no skills, with no
really no skills,
experience. I've
no
got the tools
experience.
from the Lowe's or whatever.
That's right. That's right.
I don't
I've
know what
been
to do with this, but okay.
yeah. Yeah. And so, whereas when you've got a book coach, you're working with somebody who um, can sort of shepherd your building of
Yeah.
this house and correct you when you're about to cut that piece of wood that's not quite the right weight.
Yeah.
That's not going to hold
Yeah.
the whole upper floor.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. There's something that you said recently, which I loved, which also kind of connected to your airport analogy, was just learning fly a plane. And I thought that was such a brilliant thing. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, well, this is you and I are friends with another book coach whose husband teaches people to fly planes. And years ago on one of our calls, we were kind of grieving this. Uh, book coaching is kind of new in the marketplace. People aren't sure what we do. How do we kind of show the value that we're able to deliver? Because people see, the cost of working with a book coach, and they're like, "Are you kidding? That's
Right.
ridiculous." But
Right.
really, you want to write a book. A book is a dream you've held for years and years and years. You're not a professional in the book writing space. And and it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of revision, takes a lot of iteration, and that is worth, and it's your reputation. Like your
Yeah.
name is going to be on the cover of
Yeah.
that book
That's right.
always.
Yeah.
So it's worth putting some elbow grease into and investing in it. And I loved what our colleague Nita Collins said about her husband training pilots. She said, um, they don't even question that it's going to cost 20 grand.
Yeah.
Of course it's going to cost 20 grand because I got to learn to fly a plane and there's a person who's going to help me learn to fly a plane. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, like how do we
Yeah.
help people understand that these dreams that people have held for a really long time,
Yeah.
they are your dream. They are your message of light and love into the world. And so that is what you want to honor by allowing yourself and giving yourself permission to view that dream with as much seriousness and commitment as you would view the dream of building a house or flying a plane. Those really big bucket list items.
Yeah.
Well, a book is a bucket list item too. You can certainly do a slapdash hustle bustle job.
Yeah.
It'll sell 37 copies and
Right.
your friends will have it. Or you can knuckle down and decide you're worth it
That's right.
and work with somebody who knows how to really help you in every single aspect, not just the words on the page, but how does it fit in this industry? How do you get it out there? All
Yeah.
that. It's just a mindset shift. And I think that's because there are people who have just been able to write a book and publish a great book because
Right.
they've got a gift,
Right.
right? But
Right.
that's what most of us have seen. And so that's the burden we put on
Yeah.
ourselves rather than thinking, actually, I need some training and coaching for this.
No, absolutely. And I think it speaks to two things for me. One is we tend to undervalue the arts in our society, whether it's music or drama or books or whatever. We're consumers like music, like, but we also would like all of that for free as consumers. Like, how do I get that the cheapest I can get it? But also, if you think about any of the really big masters in any art fields, there's always been somebody who was there to mentor them, right? Whether it's artists mentoring each other into the next generation, or dancers who are teaching the next generation, or so it's the same with authors. It's just we don't always recognize that those mentors have always been there,
Yeah.
and we didn't call them book coaches, but they were there
Yeah.
and had done the hard work with writers. And there was a time when um, a lot of really famous writers worked with an editor for decades and decades
That's
and
right.
decades, and those books
Yeah.
were really back and forth and polished and discussed and all of those things. Publishing houses don't have the resources to kind of develop those kind of relationships anymore, and I think that's why book coaching has risen up to fill a gap where writers need that kind of support and aren't necessarily getting them from their publishing houses in the same way. Not to say there aren't great editors at publishing houses, there are, but
Mhm.
you want to get the best book you can before they'll even look at it, right? Like you're getting an agent, or you're pitching to a press or whatever it is, you want it to be in the best shape it can be,
Yeah.
and then you'll go through that whole process. But
I'm
it's
glad you mentioned that
hard.
music analogy because, yeah, when people play in a symphony orchestra, they have probably been playing, cello since they were 8 or so.
Right.
And so when you stack up all the hours that they've spent practicing and stack
Yes,
up all the hours that they spent working with their music teacher, and
that's
probably they shifted teachers at some point, in order to go to the
right.
next level. What we do is just compressed, right?
Right.
We're compressing all of that expertise, mastery, and guidance into a year or a year and a half or whatever. Not even, it doesn't have to be a year.
Yeah, it depends on the project, I guess. Yeah,
An athlete
absolutely.
too, right? Like you
Right.
don't get to the like getting to a
Yeah.
traditional publisher is like getting onto the podium.
Yeah,
And you
it's
won't get
true.
onto the podium just by like winging it and like
Yeah.
having a great
Yeah.
couple laps in the pool. You
Yeah.
actually coach and you've trained for
That's
years.
right. Exactly. Yeah, there's so many examples of how it's just necessary. I mean, we can talk about surgeons, we can talk like any field, and there's something to be, I think maybe it's because um it's like teaching. You sometimes hear folks say, well, because I went to school, I know everything about teaching. Well, you
Yeah.
don't, because you haven't done it. And anyone who's done it knows that that's a whole other art and craft. Like there is so much behind these things that we don't understand until we actually have to do them. And I think folks have a big eye-opening moment when they start writing a book and think, oh, well, I'm an avid reader and I really understand those stories, and then when I go to write it, oh, that's that's a whole other level of thinking, right? It's a whole other it's difficult, like it's just to there's so many moving pieces to it to
Yeah.
be able to bring it all together, and
Yeah.
that's I think where book coaches can come in and really help the writer. When you're do you have a particular group? Like often book coaches are sort of niched into a certain area. They work with certain kind of clients. Do you have any niches that you have for book coaching clients? Like what is your kind of area of expertise that you're developing as a book coach?
Yeah, I'm sort of I'm what Jenny Nash hates it when people are like generalist, but I still am.
Yes.
I I read across genres, and so I do coach nonfiction and fiction, and doing the memoir certification course, but I coach memoir. So, and I'm not sure that I'm going to niche in terms of the kinds of books I work on. I think rather my niche is, it's turning out to be uh, people who are really willing to kind of work hard.
Yeah.
Because I come at it from like, regardless of what you're writing, because I made my living as a writer for so long,
Yeah.
I bring this commitment to craft. So my writers really work a lot at the line level and at the structural level. So
Yeah.
they do a lot of they kind of have to be prepared for just constant feedback.
Yeah.
It's like the bar just keeps going up and up, as it does with all of us coaches. But I think
Yeah.
um, it's probably more the client, the kind of client and the appetite they have for improvement versus the nature of the writing itself. I may niche down in time.
Yeah.
My heart seems to lie in fiction. That's where I have the most fun with craft.
Right.
But I don't know, like storytelling and finding the really great stories that illustrate a point, that's really satisfying in nonfiction
Yeah,
too.
for
And
sure.
finding vignettes in memoir that make for the good narrative arc.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. That's a
Yeah.
long answer to your question, just to say no real niche yet, but just people who don't mind, you know, uh bleeding every
Yeah.
now and then. That's
Yeah.
it.
No, but I think that's really important because so much about having a book coach is whether it is a niche, like perhaps you're like we have a friend who's a romance writer and she coaches just romance writers. So that, that is her wheelhouse and she loves it and it brings her joy. So absolutely. But I think that's really important because we as coaches, like it's not just about the book they're working on. It's about the person you're working with, and on both sides, from the book coaching client and the coach, that um, there is a reciprocal feeling about this project and working together. And you don't want to be with somebody who is not a good fit, and you want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that you put it out there that this is my expectations and this is what we're going to do. And like I can just see how your clients are going to be like, oh, this is what I need. This is the person I need to like lift this up and keep going and push me a little farther. It's like a really great Olympic athlete coach, right? They're not going to just let you run the same however many minute mile. They're going to get you faster and they're going to get you stronger and they're going to get you going. So I just love that. Like it's really about that, what that client needs that you're going to help them with. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Come ready to work.
I'm ready to work, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we need. And that's what I think that's where we find our joy too, is when we see that our work is getting better and better. That's when we as writers feel like, oh, because you can't, I've said this so many times, I can't always see it in my own work. I can see it in somebody else's, but in my own work, it's hard to see what I have to push to next. Like I need somebody saying, uh-huh, okay, but also, and
Yeah.
have you thought about this? And
Yeah.
then I'm like, oh, why didn't I think, like, it gets your brain going, and then you're ready to go to the next level and push it forward. It's really hard to do that for yourself. It's so necessary for somebody else to be a partner in that journey. And I
Yeah.
think
And it's
amazing,
like life coaching. I mean, everybody would benefit so much from like just
right?
a coach. We should all be assigned another person, another set of eyes,
I think so
another set of
too. I think so
questions,
too.
to reflect back to us what we need to,
Right.
where we need to grow next.
Right? Yeah, sometimes it's just that's what you need, is just that conversation and that somebody to reflect back to you what it is you want and need, because we just end up in our head spinning. At least
Yeah.
I do. And having great conversations with other people helps us to clarify what it is we need and want. And we see that we're not alone, right? Like we're
Oh yeah.
all in this, and as a writer, you've been there, you've written those books, you know what that's like, the process, the highs and lows of it, and that the support is everything. So
Yeah. And that's true for you too, right? With your books,
yes,
having skin in the game and having done the whole project start to finish and done revisions and brought it into the market, it really confers a level of empathy
yeah,
for
yeah.
what the writer is
And
going
I
through.
think realism, right? Like let's be realistic. It's not like even publishing a book, even though that might be the gold star at the end for people, for the reality is you have to find joy in the writing, right? Like the book itself, when it comes out, that might be a few moments of like, oh, it's so great, it feels good,
Yeah.
but also then like, okay, write the next thing.
Yeah.
Just starts again. So finding the joy in the practice of writing, and I think is so important, because those other milestones are great, but they're kind of not long lasting in the same way as the work. And then of course, once the book is out and it's getting readership, and you maybe have people returning, like sending you emails or whatever, commenting on it, that feels nice, it does, but you're just back at the work, you're
Yeah.
back at the desk, you're back on the next story, you're still in the thing. So being able to do the work and finding somebody who's in it with you,
Yeah.
great, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're the perfect coach to uplift those people and keep pushing them forward and growing as writers. I
It's
just
job
thought it
in a
was
way.
What was that? Sorry.
It's just the best job in the world, isn't it?
Oh, it's so good. Like I had no idea. I didn't know it existed
Yeah.
until I left teaching. And then I found Jenny Nash and I thought, is this for real?
Yeah.
And it's for real. And it's the best job in the world. It's so satisfying. And of course, I met so many other lovely book coaches as well along the way. And I just love everyone's passion for it. Like without exception,
Mhm.
the book coaches we know are just extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
They just have like a passion and a love for words and books and their clients, and they just want the best for their writers. Like it's just an incredible space to be in. So
Yeah.
I'm very grateful, and
I'm
I'm
very,
so grateful to know you.
yeah. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I appreciate how you have sparked me. Like you've sparked two or three things in my mind
Okay.
that I get to take away and like I'll probably journal on them and see, and I love that. Like I love a good, really, it's like a coaching call. It feels like we've just had a conversation, but you are surfacing questions inside myself that are going to carry me farther. So
I love
this has
that.
been not only enjoyable, but very fruitful. So thank you.
Hey, I'm so glad to hear that. And thank you so much for doing this. I hope that we'll have another conversation down the road. And I have always really admired you. And I know that we haven't had a lot of opportunities to talk one on one. So this was really a gift for me. So thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
Do you have writing goals that you want to achieve in 2025? If you need support, encouragement, accountability, and community, join the Women Writing Circle. We meet bi weekly to set writing goals and get pages done. Go to Women Writing on Substack and subscribe. Let's create a little magic this year. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to have a coffee break with us at Women Writing. Don't forget to subscribe to Women Writing on Substack. If you like this episode, share it with someone who needs a writing break and a little inspiration. Happy writing! Thank you to Michael Jensen for his original music and editing, and to Mia Jensen for the logo design.